watching Music Legends on NBC. Next, the Sultan of Swing, Mark Knopfler, whose throaty voice and trademark riffs have made him a mega star. Influential guitarists of contemporary music, Mark Knopfler. Dire Straits formed in 1978 in a cramped South London pub against the background of the new punk movement. They found a niche and were clever in creating a band playing intimate rock music. Mark Knopfler's laconic vocals and fluid guitar style soon made him one of the most celebrated artists since Eric Clapton. From their debut single Sultans of Swing, Mark and the unassuming style of Dire Straits sold millions of records around the globe. Their Brothers in Arms album was the highest-selling record of the 80s. So let's meet the man who's improving with age.
There has to be an element in you that refuses to grow up properly, that there's some sort of growing old disgracefully aspect of the whole thing. I suppose when I was a kid, when I was 15, all I wanted to do was be a blues guitar player. I remember when I went to get my first electric guitar. My first guitar had to be electric and had to be red. And my dad, God bless him, couldn't afford a Fender Strat. It was an imitation one. It cost him 50 quid, which was a big stretch for him in those days, you know. And the old guy who sold it to him just said to me as I was going out the shop, he said, "Stick at it." Brilliant advice, eh? A real genius.
You get a shiver in the dark, it's raining in the park, but meantime.
I think the only reason why I stuck at it was because I was obsessed, almost unhealthily so.
A band is blowing Dixie, double fall time.
You have to be slightly obsessed in order to do it. It's very difficult to know what people like to look at or want to listen to, what it is about certain people. It's certainly got nothing to do with good looks or anything like that.
As a child, music burned in Mark's soul. Traditional songs and the rawness of life laid the foundations for his musical development.
Yeah, well, I was born in Scotland, actually. When I was about 7 or 8, we moved to Tyneside, to Newcastle. We used to sing songs like The Waters of Tyne and beautiful melodies, as well as all the Geordie songs of varying degrees of seductiveness. And I suppose what happens is that you start absorbing the Celtic music without realizing that you are. And it's actually more of an influence than you think.
These mist-covered mountains are a home now for me. But my home is the lowlands, and always will be.
Bob Dylan's always been one of my biggest influences from when I was a little boy, and I had his first album, must have been about 11 years old. And I was fascinated by it and then by all his records subsequently.
It's time to come away, darling, pretty. It's time.
It's just one of those things that's there, and big influence.
Heal me with.
I always felt that there was a kind of similarity. Maybe it's a reason why we relate, is that we're both from northern towns and we both wanted to have rock and roll groups, but we couldn't do it. So we got involved in hammering on acoustic guitars because, I mean, in my case, I couldn't afford an amplifier. And I didn't have a van. And for Bob, it was the same thing. He told me that he wanted to be Little Richard, but he couldn't do that up in Hibbing, Minnesota. I'd have loved to have been a musician full-time from day one, but it just never worked out that way. I think a lot of musicians will be familiar with the whole thing and trying and failing and all the rest of it. You just got to keep bashing your head against it. And you try and you try and you try. There's kids all over the world trying to start bands. The ones that continue going on trying to start them are the ones that will eventually get there, because they're the ones that have got the willpower and that obsession. Because everybody gets their shot in this. There is no question about that. Because you can play in pubs and clubs and small rooms and things, eventually what happens is that audiences start queuing around the block and then down the stairs or wherever it is to see you. And it just goes on from there. Remember when we...
Is anybody home? Calling Elvis. You all alone?
Sounds quite dull in a way, but I've always been a roots music fan. In my teens in Newcastle, I started going to folk clubs and was exposed to a lot of more English folk music as well as American folk music. And it just really went on from there as a love affair with the music. I didn't even know that it was Britons playing American songs, some black, some white. I had no idea what it was. All I knew was that I liked it.
Way down Louisiana, there's a hurricane coming. The little boy climbed the stairs, and all on the levee, all the people come running, and the little boy sang his prayer. And the sleepy little lad smiling, but his daddy, and he's asking for his G.I. Joe. And daddy took him in with a kiss upon the chin and said, my little one, I love you so. Daddy.
The reason that I go to Nashville to record is not to record country music. In fact, if you were to play me the country top 20 now, I don't think I'd like one record. All the top 50 come to that. Nashville has gone from bad to worse, but it's still got gold nuggets all over the place.
Well, lay down your head, now don't get out of bed. Don't you let bedbugs bite.
It's still true of Nashville that people play together. In fact, they're always getting together, knocking songs together. That's part of the system there. People say, instead of we must have dinner sometime, it's we must ride sometime. People say that to you.
With the song Money for Nothing, Mark took a cynical jab at himself and the music industry by looking at his glamorous life from a working class point of view. But just how important is working to him?
I think work is so important to the growth of a personality, the growth of a person. Which is why unemployment is such a worrisome and difficult thing to cope with. It's difficult to feel good about yourself when you are unemployed. It forms your personality and your attitude towards people who won't work, or your attitude towards people who have got an attitude about work. And then a lot of work is unpleasant. I'm glad that I've been through a lot of the things that I've been through for as long as I've been through them. I'm glad of the experiences that I've had. Accept that a lot of it's been done the hard way, the blood and bullets way. Listening to music is an education, so you don't listen the same way when you're a kid, and it all depends on how much exposure you've had to it. So it's a bit like wine in that respect, that it tastes funny when you first drink it when you're a kid, and then you learn to distinguish between screech and good stuff. And it's the same with music, really. As the years go by and you just expose yourself more to the music, and it starts to seep into you and to affect you. And that's really, it's a kind of growth just from time spent doing it and from listening to it. I think there's a real duality that happens with becoming ancient and creaky. And one of them is that you can become this boring, cynical person who feels that things aren't going to turn out too well. But the other thing is a kind of hope that seems to spring up from time to time. And whether that's just to do with being happy, or whether it's to do with being a parent, or what it has to do with, I'm not quite sure. I just try to avoid cynicism as much as possible.
That's all we have time for, but do keep an eye out for more music legends here on NBC. Until then, from me, Jason Roberts, bye-bye.